Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Selling Fort Collins podcast. I am excited for this episode. I'm here with my friend, Jedd Rose. He is the president and co-founder of Topo Designs. If you haven't heard of Topo Designs, check him out. But Jedd is a local guy who has built a worldwide brand. Jedd, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to hang out again.
Yeah, you bet. Well, tell everybody about Topo. What is Topo? And then we'll get into kind of how it started, where it's at now, and where it's going.
Yeah, we're a brand. We sell both backpacks and apparel. And we're kind of on the lifestyle side of outdoor, but really kind of make products for, every day as well as getting outside. Have been here in Fort Collins since 2008 and really started with just backpacks and have grown into travel as well as men's and women's apparel. And, really based on this idea of mountain culture, Colorado lifestyle, and basically the lives that we all live here. So it's been a pretty fun journey over that time period.
Yeah, we'll get into how it started, but I want to talk about like when it really blew up for you, because I know I had this moment. You might remember this. This was years ago. I was on a subway in New York City and I saw somebody with a Topo bag. And that's really when I knew that you were a big deal. I took a picture of the bag. I texted it to you.
Right. Yeah, I remember
you realize pretty quick, like not everybody's Fort Collins nice. Like that guy was like, why are you taking a picture of my bag? And it was a little bit of a thing there. But that's when I realized like this brand is huge. But like, how did it blow up and when did you realize that you had something big?
It's, I would say it's just been like this really kind of slow progression over time. And we've had some, bigger stair steps in there, but I think the nice part about it is it's just really grown fairly organically. We have a really great, fan base out there that do just like, you talked about, of seeing a bag out in the wild and going and chasing that person, talking to them about it and where they got it and kind of connecting over the brand. I've literally seen this when I've been traveling. I've seen two people that I don't know go over and kind of pull their backpack over to each other and start talking about it, which is like, the best thing in the world. Oh yeah, it's so cool. So I think, over time, we've just sort of built this idea of what the brand is about. And definitely if you get it, you love it. And we've had, like I said, just this great set of fans that have been really champions of the brand and really have spread the word overall. So yeah, it's been great.
I mean, this started with you just like sketching in your basement in Laramie, Wyoming.
Yeah.
How old were you when this whole thing kind of formed in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably, too old to be taking a completely different career path in life, but I was about 30 when I started it.
Well, let's stop right there. Let's pause for a second. What was the career path that you were going down, and then when did you pivot?
Yeah, so I went to school, University of Wyoming. I really focused on fine art. At that point, I had been doing some art classes in high school, didn't really have a lot of focus in terms of what I wanted to do. And it seemed like art had been doing, okay for me. I was pretty, into it and had some skill. And so when I got to college, I just thought, well, I guess art's here. I guess I'll do that. So, majored in sculpture as well as did some printmaking in college. And in retrospect, it was amazing. Small school, really small class sizes. This was in Wyoming, so University of Wyoming. My dad was a neuroscience professor there, so very familiar with the school, and just decided to go that path. And so I was really fortunate to be able to do that, especially at a time when, education costs were pretty low. The school was cheap. I could just, have a job and pay for it basically as I was going through school. So there wasn't this like massive amount of pressure to have this career path that was really, really straightforward and then get out and have, a ton of student debt and having to pay it off. So I feel really fortunate there. I also feel fortunate that it really taught me a lot about being creative and problem solving. I still think to this day that some of my critiques with projects in my art classes were some of the most harsh criticism I've ever faced, right? So I developed pretty thick skin early.
That's interesting because you'd almost think it would be the opposite, like they might be coddling you a little bit, but not at the University of Wyoming, apparently.
No, and the other students there were kind of, tasked with the same thing. They all wanted to do good work. So it was probably mostly harsh from the group, and it could be really great too. And you knew if you did something well, people would tell you did a good job.
It was just real.
Yeah, yeah. And if you, kind of bricked it on an assignment, people would tell you, right? So, I think that to me really set me up to be effective as a creative overall. So at the very end of my college career, I took a couple graphic design classes because I, finally started thinking about actually getting a job. I'd kind of entertained the idea of becoming a college professor, but just I don't know. I didn't really love that idea for some reason. And so I took some graphic design classes, ended up getting a job at a local print shop there, which I was really lucky that the woman owning the print shop gave me a shot there and, did a bunch of different stuff. It was a really small business. Now looking back on that was a great experience too, because I got really exposed to how a small business works and how hard she worked to keep it moving and how she was like constantly trying to split her time between growing the business and running the business. But I did a lot of like pre-press and kind of, the physical work of cutting business cards and like punching holes in things, as well as doing graphic design there. So I got to do that for a little while, and that kind of taught me the ropes of the digital design world. Ended up getting a job back at the university, managing a small design department there. Through that, I was doing freelance design. So I met a guy who worked in town who recently joined another startup that was doing back then what seemed like super high tech, which was digitizing video assets and keywording them. So like a very small Getty Images, if you've ever heard Getty Images, right?
And when you say back then, what's the approximate year?
This was probably 2005-ish.
Yeah, so the cutting edge.
Yeah, exactly. We had these crazy storage machines where there were all these hard drives and there was like a robot arm like picking hard drives and moving them around and stuff, just because storage wasn't nearly what it was today in terms of physical size, right? It was pretty big. So got exposed to that side. I essentially did a lot of the branding and creative for that company. They were mostly a B2B company. So we would take assets from like Sony Pictures and the NTAA and like National Geographic, recut it. And then at that time, doing kind of high-end video and film was still really expensive before drones were around, and you'd have to like rent a helicopter to get an establishing shot of Vegas. A little more expensive, right? So we would take those assets that were, whatever from like Bad Boys 3 and never made the, movie, or maybe they made the movie and there just weren't any famous actors in it. So we'd like clip those out and then we'd sell it to a company that wanted to use it for another commercial or something maybe a little bit, less high end, or, even to other movies that didn't have the budget to,
it's a cool job.
Yeah, it was a very cool job. So definitely got exposed to a lot of like digital techniques, a lot of videography, and just looking at all that footage. So I kind of split my time between doing creative for the company in terms of the, face to the B2B side of it, as well as doing a lot of like video editing and, kind of teaser reels. And so it was, definitely a very holistic job. And again, got pretty exposed to that business world and startup environment because it was a small company and they were trying to grow really fast. And so I unfortunately was commuting back and forth to Denver every day. So it was a long commute, got kind of, really sucked the life out of me to a certain degree. And so really wanted to land here in Fort Collins. And so ended up getting the opportunity to work for a medical animation firm here in town that was, a similar kind of idea of being an agency to other businesses, but creating all of that content internally. So we had a bunch of animators there, very specific job role of there are a few programs in the country that do it. So you kind of go like halfway through medical school and halfway through design and art school. And then you sort of meet at the end and you have this knowledge of a bunch of different medical concepts and anatomy and physiology, and combine that with an art background and the design background. And so they would use really high-end software, software that you would like make a Pixar movie with, right? And create 3D models and animate them and use it a lot for patient education or commercials, or, you can imagine if you get a knee replacement, you go into your doctor's office and they can show you like a digital model of what the knee replacement would look like, kind of like what the recovery would look like for it. So I would take all that stuff, kind of put it together, and I kind of ran the interactive side of that. So like iOS apps for phone and iPad, and even, back then some kind of simple web-based models too of that stuff. And then, kind of deliver that to places like, Johnson & Johnson and big pharmaceutical companies. And as well as, we worked with the government on things like traumatic brain injury for soldiers. And so it was a really interesting job. It was very specific to that industry, but extremely creative, very much an agency environment, and, kind of solving business problems for people there.
I mean, the theme seems to be extremely creative, very much an agency environment. You're kind of like getting exposed to this entrepreneurial world, these cutting edge spaces where people are kind of really at the forefront, really kind of pushing a little bit. And it sounds like you were in like the hustler role at these places too.
Yeah, definitely. And usually on the creative side, that was it, and still is really my strength, I would say, like design, creative, branding, all of those things. So I got exposed to a lot of that stuff. I think eventually I just was at a point where I never really intended to do any of that. I was an art student and then decided really quickly to get into graphic design. And then 10 years later, I'd been doing all of this stuff that was cool. I mean, it was definitely like, it wasn't a, no woe is me on there by any means. I really liked it and it was fun. But I would say that, maybe I had like semi midlife crisis. I wasn't even old enough to have a midlife crisis at that point. Right? But
I think 30 is an age though that a lot of people are like, hey, I thought it was going to be different at this age. I thought I was going to be further along. So you had kind of an awakening, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
As maybe when you were approaching 30. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
When you were approaching 30, of like, this is like, what do I really want to be doing?
Right.
And that's what kind of maybe started drawing you to the sketches and doing these different things. Before we get there, why did you want to land in Fort Collins?
I grew up in Laramie, so just north of here. Actually really, really liked it. Lived there for, like almost 30 years. My wife ended up getting a job at CSU, or getting an opportunity to get a job at CSU. So, we really thought about it for a while. And I, of course, was super familiar with Fort Collins, had been coming down here my whole life, was really, really attracted to the town in general because it was just slightly bigger for me. It wasn't too big, but, it just kind of gave you a little bit more of that urban city opportunity here. A few more restaurants, a few more things to do, just a little bit more, I think, diversity in terms of, just the town living in here. So weather's a little better.
Yeah. Laramie's cold.
Yeah. And it's high altitude, so a lot of that experience we could still have there. But It's really, and having lived here for like 18 years now, it's like the perfect size for me. And especially like having Topo, I've been able to travel all over the world and experience, just about any other environment. And I love coming back here all the time because it's just like perfect size, perfect mix of like city and outdoor. And I think we saw that, when we had the opportunity to move down here. And of course, I experienced that growing up too.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changed a lot since you moved here, but the thing I hear from a lot of people who we talk to on the show, and I feel the same way, is that that same authentic feeling, that same vibe, that same Fort Collins nice, whatever you want to call it, it's still here.
Yeah.
There's just more of it.
Yeah.
Is that how you would explain it to people?
I would say so. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh man, it's changed so much." But I mean, I've been here for almost 20 years now, and I still feel like it's about the same.
It's so approachable, right? Like
it's so approachable.
It's so we can walk everywhere in Old Town. There's
exactly.
there's more great restaurants. There's more great coffee shops. There's more great places to have brunch. I mean, the trails. And one of the guests in the show is Mike Calhoun. He's been running Fort Collins trail system and all the parks for over 30 years. And he's like right out of a movie. He's like this incredible guy who's just all in the parks and the trails. So like all these things are like it's the same people who have been in these positions, who have been leading this city, guiding things. And you throw in that kind of just that entrepreneurial vibe, that authentic feeling. And it's sort of just, it's stayed the positive things have remained.
I totally agree. And I think they've just gotten a little better.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that there are a few more people here now, there's a little bit more budget to like keep the trail systems amazing, keep the downtown amazing. I think that it's been a really good set of, whomever is like keeping that fabric together. And I know people come and go, right? But it seems like to me that it's been like the initiatives have been in the right spot in order to keep the things that are the most precious about Fort Collins intact, right? Like you're saying, like downtown was always my favorite. When I'd come out of, another town coming down here, I'd be like, I just want to go downtown and hang out, right? And I still just want to go downtown and hang out, right? It's great. So, but there are other little pockets of Fort Collins too now that are, maybe not quite as quaint as downtown, but are just as vibrant. And I think that's what's really interesting to me now is like, it's not just downtown. You have these like little cool areas, kind of like over by where I live, just south of campus. There's a few businesses around there that I absolutely love. Right. So, and I can just walk from my house over there, and that's our little like gathering spot, as well as going downtown too. And I think there are a bunch of those around town now. So it's not quite as isolated to just one spot in town. There are little community gathering places that, whether there's a brewery there or a couple restaurants or whatever it is, that neighborhood vibe is really coming into its own in a small town like this, rather than just like one centralized location and then everybody's just spread out after that. Which is great.
What are those spots close to your house that you like to go?
There's the one basically on Prospect and College over there, where like Prost is over there now, and then Music City is over there, and the Tortilleria is over there, which we go to just about every other day, it seems like, getting tortillas from them. So it's amazing just to have that. And and it feels like every time we're doing that, it feels like very, very big city vibe, right? But it's just like a walkable distance from our house. And we're never like having to plan for traffic or anything that's outside of maybe like 10 minutes a day, right? So it's awesome that way too.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's just kind of all evolved. I was, in a previous episode, was talking with the GM of the Elizabeth, and, who you actually met just a little bit ago here.
Yep.
And talking about just the alleys in Old Town and how, used to, a lot of people would first get introduced to Old Town, years ago. They would just rave about how this is amazing. All these alleys are connecting things, and they're paved and they're well lit. You can kind of just like duck into these little cool bars or restaurant in the alleys. And that's only been amplified, right? Like that's only just evolved over the years. To your point, more of a budget, that equates to just more connected alleyways and in Old Town expanding. And, one thing, Brian Sukup was on the show, and he owns all of those buildings, and he's one of the legends in Fort Collins kind of created downtown and Old Town the way we know it. Owns those buildings around Old Town Square. We talked a lot about that too, how Old Town is just continuing to expand, but continuing to keep that authenticity, that approachability, that walkability that is incredibly rare.
It is.
And then adjacent to that is the Poudre Trail system. You can walk or you can bike all the way up to LaPorte, or there's all over northern Colorado, certainly anywhere in town.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about Fort Collins too, is there's so much outdoor to do in town, right? Like there's so much fishing, there's so much trail access. And like where I live right on the Spring Creek Trail. I can just walk from my house, run down there, run, go around. Like I can take my bike. I can literally like ride to fish all the time. So yeah, we're close to outdoors, but we're even more spoiled because outdoors is right next to us too, right? And I think that's what I really appreciate about, the city taking care of that too, is that it's definitely a priority, and they know how much people really value that here. So it's just gotten better. Like trail system has just gotten better. Like all the ponds and everything that you have to do around town are just really nurtured and taken care of and made a priority too, which is great. So
we are spoiled. We're super spoiled. I feel like people who haven't discovered Fort Collins yet, they will, at least a lot of them will.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. I think it's, we'll continue smart growth. At least I believe that we will. But I feel incredibly lucky. I know you do too.
Yeah,
and the way it's evolved over these past years. And I mean, kind of in the same time frame, like Topo really evolved. So let's go back to 30-year-old Jedd sketching. Yeah. What happened? What was the breakthrough? How did this whole thing start?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was able to sort of tap into a lot of what was super interesting to me, that was even kind of related to what I was doing as a career, but mostly just really personally interesting. I did a lot of all the artwork I did in college was, I would say, very family centric of my experiences and kind of my outdoor experiences, like with my dad and my mom, and kind of like what was most important to me in life. And I was sort of thinking about that a lot, I think too, not having done artwork in a long time. But I think to me, what was most important was this idea of being connected to something that was really interesting to me in life. And so at the time I kind of always have been extremely interested in fashion. So I always read a ton about it. I research brands. I'm always looking at trends. I'm always kind of like driven by that what's next in there. And mostly it's just really interesting to me as a person. I was obsessed with it when I was a kid. I was like, the only kid in Wyoming that was super into fashion.
I was going to say, every time I've hung out with you, you're that guy that when you show up, it's like, I need to up my game. Like everything's dialed. Like it really...
Yeah, and it's just like, to me, it's really interesting, right? And there's something about that creativity, as well as I think just trend and being able to see something come into fashion, literally. That's always been just fascinating, and I think it's one of those things that's really interesting in life, and it keeps it really fresh and new, and not you just don't feel static that way. So I was looking at a lot of fashion at that time. I was also really interested in outdoor gear. I've always just been, insanely obsessed with being outside. So my take on it was that I was doing a bunch of research into old outdoor brands that were being kind of repopularized and nurtured in Japan, that didn't really exist here. So that maybe the more commercial version of that existed in the US, but the more heritage, more like throwback retro versions of that brand were really being almost as a separate brand brought to fruition in Japan.
And what made you want to hone in on that? Because you've mentioned this to me before, and I've never really asked this follow-up question. Like, out of all the things for you to hone in on, that just seems like such a niche.
Yeah, well, to me, it was like it combined outdoor and fashion in this really perfect mix.
Okay,
right?
You just stumbled upon that in some platform somewhere at some time.
Yep. Yeah, it was really kind of being discovered here in the US to a certain degree with a small set of people that were talking about it. And so I was, reading their sites and looking at kind of what was coming into fashion in Japan. And I was just thinking, oh man, I had that backpack growing up as a kid. Like that was the thing that really I associated with being outside, and all the like amazing fond memories that I had with that bag. I was seeing it be reproduced in Japan, but there was nobody who was doing it here, because the outdoor industry at that time was like super, super tech driven, just focused on, and I think they still are to a certain degree, but at that time it was just 100% about the next technology, next innovation, performance, not really much about this hybrid idea of lifestyle and outdoor together. It was just outdoor, and like that was about it, right? So this idea that they were taking a historic, really cool outdoor product, putting it more of in a lifestyle space as well as outdoor, right? Like it could go to work, it could go out on the trail with you, whatever.
Yeah, you're implementing things like canvas and leather and all of these things that just like, and everyone else was just kind of in the sea of sameness.
Right. Exactly. And I love the idea. Like I hated having to put on like some sort of tech kit to go outside and then come back and then switch into the stuff that I thought it looked good in, right? Or like had some sort of fashion relevance to it. So I like this idea of being able to just use one thing, and it served both the fashion and the trend side, as well as, was performance enough to where it really functioned outdoors. So I was mostly obsessed with this idea of like all these backpacks coming back into the sort of, collective consciousness of the Japanese side, and really just wanted to make one for myself, because I had these old ones that were sort of falling apart and I couldn't get one from Japan. So being a sculpture major, I'm like, I am like relatively okay with 3D things, and like I can see how it would go together. I didn't know how to sew at all. I didn't know how to make, a viable product in the world, but mostly just did it for myself. Right?
You were scratching your own itch, and then this is how it all started.
Yeah. So I'm probably to a fault very hands-on with anything I want to do. I just really I was like the kid who would be watching a basketball game in my room, but have to play Nerf hoop at the same time, right? Because I always just wanted to be doing it. Like I liked watching it, but loved just being involved with it, right?
But by the way, I love how like I didn't know how to sew or really do anything else, but
but I did know. I did know that was a thing. I was super into it.
Yeah, and you knew you could figure it out.
And so I could probably figure it out, right? So I sewed really terrible prototypes, honestly, but I really enjoyed it. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't reach out to anybody. I didn't seek help, because I really, at the time, it wasn't like I was trying to go really quickly into this startup mentality or something. I was mostly just wanting to do it as a creative outlet for myself, So after, some months of this, and my wife coming down to the basement asking me what was going on, like what's happening with all this stuff, why are you down here so much, I kind of thought like, okay, this has gone beyond just kind of like hobby land, and I can actually see a business in this too, which was great. And then I think, in the back of my mind, I just thought, man, it would be really cool if I could do this full time instead of the other job that I have, right? So I think that kind of clicked in my mind. I also realized I'm not the most savvy operations guy. I'm not the best math guy, as anybody can tell you, but I knew that me sewing backpacks in the basement was not going to scale very well, right? So I immediately thought of like, okay, what do I know that could help me move forward with this? I knew branding. I knew how to build a website. I knew how to do photography. I knew how to do a lot of the other stuff that were a big part of creating a brand, and that, the actual physical building of the product wasn't necessarily something that I was going to be able to quickly, get better at. The people that we use to sew bags have been doing it for decades. They're amazing. They're super talented. The processes are really, really dialed, right? So I had no knowledge of that at that point either, but I kind of could quickly, deduce that I wasn't going to be able to scale it up by myself. So ended up luckily finding a guy who was just starting a sew shop in Broomfield, and was looking for some clients. So it was just super serendipitous that he was willing to, take myself and my business partner on at that point. And so it's 25 bags, and we would just buy a little fabric, buy some, zippers and hardware, and he'd sew a few more,
So it started with 25 bags.
Yeah, he was like, all right, that's the minimum, right? I'm not going to do any less than
and you're
that,
like,
but
I'll take the minimum.
Yeah, right.
Let's see if we have a viable concept here.
Right.
Pause right there for a second, because I wonder if there are people listening to this that are, they envision a different life for themselves. They have this idea, they have this passion, but a lot of people are scared to take that leap. What advice would you give to those people? Because there was this moment when you just knew, like, there was something else out there for you.
Yeah.
And you had the courage to go for it. How would you advise someone else? What advice would you give them if they're thinking about going for it?
I would say you have to be really, really, really interested in it. It's too hard to do something that you don't like. And I think a lot of people are just really interested in business, right? They're interested in the mechanics of it, the competitive nature of it, the growth and solving those problems and all of those things. And they could do it within, whatever context they're just really interested in business. So if that's you, great. I would say that's a really good place to start. I would say there's a lot of other people who are very passionate about a thing, right? To me, it was like this fashion outdoor hybrid concept, right? Like that was so fascinating.
I mean, you're obsessed with it at the time.
I am.
Right?
Yeah, I still am.
I think you still are. Yes.
All the time.
I don't think that has changed.
No, not at all. And I think that's what makes it so great for me. I'm on my own time, always researching, always looking at new brands, always looking at new products, kind of cataloging all this stuff, aggregating it, passing it out to the team on Sunday night, and they're like, please stop with that.
Yeah, you can't wait like Monday morning, put the jersey on, let's go.
Right. So it's definitely something for me that the business side is sort of the means to be able to do it. Right. Like if it was just a hobby for me, I think it would probably actually be far less interesting. The business side, I don't, I've always kind of not loved it. But I think what it does is it creates sort of like, it's being like amateur versus pro. Right. And like once you get into that pro land, it's like, oh, there's another set of things in here that are really fascinating to be able to do. And a lot of it I don't really like, right? Like I don't like having, all these revenue targets and all the things that we do, but that's just part of being pro, right? But you also get to make a lot more amazing product, right? And do a lot more amazing things on the brand side and do things that you never thought you could do because you're like on that pro side. So I would say that, yeah, if you like business, then I would say great, then get into business, do it. I think being an entrepreneur in general is it's just really, really difficult because it just never stops, right? And it like any hour of any day of any week of any month of any year, something could come up that you have to deal with.
There's no off season.
There's no off season, right? So I would say that's the downside, but for some people, that's kind of the upside.
Yeah, you have to like it.
Exactly. So if you love it, it's great.
Yeah.
If you, I think if you're kind of like, I kind of like that, then probably not so much, right? Like do that for someone else, right? And then you can have your own passion on the side. And obviously, business doesn't have to be your passion. I would say that it definitely consumes your life. So if it's really symbiotic to your life, like my business is, right? Like I can take, like last weekend I took all my stuff out skiing with my son, right? And I'm like skiing in Topo stuff and it's amazing. And that's part of it. And I'm constantly looking at the little attachments and straps and stuff while I'm doing it, right? Of course. But all of it works together, right? So it can ebb and flow out of my life in a way that feels, very doable and it's not just sort of overwhelming all the time. Whereas I don't think I could run a business that I didn't really like the concept of. I'm not that passionate about business in order to do it.
You found that sweet spot. You found that synergy. But it starts, like you said, with people being really honest with themselves. Like, do you love it? Like, do you love it down to your core? I think that's amazing advice. Well, you loved what you were doing down to your core, and it was 25 bags. Like, that's the order. So let's pick up there. Where do you go from 25 bags? I mean, This is the first time we've talked about this, and we've talked about Topo before, but I didn't know that it started with 25 bags. Like, what happens next?
Yeah. So I took those bags, did some product photography, built a website, and had a business partner too that was working on sort of the business side, like getting us up and running, doing all the legal stuff that we needed to do, right? And ended up launching the website, and I think we sold like one or two, just to random people that found it, and then ended up getting an inquiry from a Japanese distributor, although they didn't tell us that they were a distributor first. They just bought a couple bags, sort of, secret shopper style, and we sent them off to Japan. We're like, okay, cool. That's, someone in
By the way,
Japan
when you sold a
buying it.
few bags, were you like high-fiving your business partner? Like,
Oh yeah, totally. Like it's working, right? Like we're doing it.
We're on our way.
Yeah, exactly. And so they bought them. We sent them to them. They tried them out. They loved them, and reached out to us and were like, "Hey, would you be interested in selling in Japan?" And so,
Wow.
I was like full star eyeballs on that one. I'm like, this is like all of the things are coming back, right? To
This
the
is
beginning.
like your first 25 bags.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Exactly.
You sell to this person in Japan, and then they
Yeah.
call you. Like, that's huge.
It is huge. It is huge. And it was a big catalyst for us to not only figure out what that business side looked like. So doing like international distribution versus just, most people like make something, sell to their local community, sell to their mom, right? Their mom tells a friend, right? And then they kind of grow out from the epicenter. So we were doing completely the opposite. We were going from, here in Colorado all the way to Japan. And so we got some traction there. They put in a small wholesale order, which actually was great for us because then it gave us a little cash to keep making more bags, right? They represented several other brands at that time, and they were always kind of looking for new stuff. So they were willing to take a chance on us to start out with them. So we sold in Japan. We ended up doing a couple of sort of high-end boutique trade shows here because at the time, we sell to REI now. We sell to a bunch of, really traditional outdoor stores. At the time, outdoor really wasn't clicking with what we were doing. It just wasn't really the concept of the outdoor world. So we sold mostly to higher end lifestyle boutiques in like New York and LA, right? So we were going to Japan first, then we were going to the coasts here, and really selling to more, I would say, an urban crowd that was interested in this like outdoor vibe, but really high quality, simple product that they could use basically like in normal life. And some of them took it outside too.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, but there may be idea of outdoor adventurous more. I'm going to put my laptop in my bag and I'm going to walk 7 blocks.
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely very kind of urban use overall. Of course, we were using it here outside, right? And everybody was like, well, is that a backpacking backpack or what do you do with that? I'm like, you just put your stuff in it and you carry it around and it's great, right? And it's going to last forever and everybody loves it, right? So yeah. So and at the time too, it was kind of this nice overlap of kind of the movement in men's fashion where it was like really heritage driven. Workwear was really coming into its own. People were really learning about how things were made. Made in US was really big at that point. And so we had kind of the accessory complement to a lot of brands that were doing that on the apparel side. So if you were going to buy apparel like raw denim, right, and from, Cone Mills, and you were going to break them in, you wanted a bag with that same concept, right? You didn't want to just go buy like, some cheap bag that was going to fall apart. You want like this really nice, well-made bag that you could pair with all this heritage workwear, right? So that's kind of how we went into the market with it, was kind of sitting symbiotically next to it. And we didn't have this as like, this grandiose marketing scheme that we were doing it. I was just buying all that other stuff too. And I was super interested in that world. So like, I like my bag. These guys probably like my bag too, right? So it just sort of naturally found its way in there. And we would talk to the boutiques that I, would get, or my, business partner would be like, oh, they would definitely get us, right? Because we get them. So we just started talking to them, and it was very small scale at that point, very, interaction driven with those places. And like I was saying, we're doing these smaller trade shows too, where we talk to these. Definitely, yeah. So we were talking to these small store owners, and kind of convincing them to bring it in. And there was a big outdoor trade show that we eventually, we were a part of it for many, many years, but, went there, got super freaked out by the whole thing because of these massive brands, right? These huge booths.
Felt a little imposter syndrome, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's no way that we could ever do that in our minds, right? Mostly, I would say, because the outdoor world was, like I was saying, so focused on something that was not us.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't lifestyle driven. It definitely was not heritage driven. That was old, and that was the past, and that was bad, right? So we had to get past that point of being super scared.
How did you get past that? Because what you just mentioned, I think a lot of people probably struggle with. Like, they can't even imagine that. They can't even you have to think it first, right?
Yeah.
Before there's any chance of it happening in reality. How did you get past that?
Well, I think, if there's anything that I've done, over time, it's just try to live as far out in the future as possible and just see trends, right? Like if you're looking at fashion trends, you're always looking at what's next, and you're probably like years ahead of what's actually happening right now and on scale, right? So I think, to me, I was just seeing the possibility of this future out there that was not being served by that huge industry there, right? So, and it's not like we were anti-outdoor or anti-technology, because I used all that stuff too, right? Like I have super high-end, super techie waders that I use for fishing, right? I don't want to get rid of those. Those are great. But there's also a spot for other things too in there, right? And I saw the fact that all these brands weren't talking about anything but being outside. It was like, if you were doing anything in life but being outside, we're not even going to acknowledge that. Right. So I'm like, well, the vast majority of people can't just ski every day, all day. Right. Like, they have to be able to go to work and do all these things, but it doesn't mean they aren't those outdoor people when they're going to work too. Right. So how do we pull that together into a spot where they can be who they are, but in a more kind of holistic, symbiotic relationship with being outdoors and being at work and, taking your kids to school and traveling and doing all these things, but still have that outdoor vibe and who you are as an outdoor person, but just, integrated into your life a lot better. And I think that's where I saw, at least, there was that possibility that could be there. And I also, my business partner has always been great about this, is saying the world's really big, right? There are a lot of people out there. And it's even more the case these days that you really just have to get a certain set of those people into what you're talking about a short period of time. Right. And this is kind of like daily. You want them to come back and buy more things, right? And be a long-term customer, but they don't have to be fully committed to your brand all the time. They can have a bag and that's enough, right? And they can have a bunch of other brands too, right? But as long as they love your brand, they don't have to, tell all the other brands to stick it, right? They can just have your brand as well as 10 other brands, and they're super happy, and you can have all of those people in there too. So I think that's the other thing that changed too, is that people became a little bit more inclusive of what clothing was and what it meant. And, I remember having a conversation, I don't know, it was probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago, with someone yeah, people are going to wear puffy jackets and jeans. And they were like, absolutely not. There's no way. That's just bonkers, right? There's no way people are actually going to wear a super technical piece and some lifestyle stuff together. And turns out, that one of my predictions came true. There's a lot that didn't, but
I bet there's more than one that came true. But I mean, you were onto something. I mean, this is probably the same time that Lululemon, the athleisure, and these types of things that people were kind of starting to get hey, it's passable. I can keep the yoga pants on. I can keep the warm-ups, and Yeah, I don't have to like,
Hmm.
I don't know, go all the way home and change or bring a different bag. Like I can live my life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, another good example, the athleisure stuff is a really good example. Another good example is if you look at a lot of these culture brands like street culture or like skate is my favorite, right? There are a lot of brands that grew out of skate that are just completely ubiquitous to life right now, like Vans, right? Great example of that, of coming like very, very specific background in something, but turns out to be a really great product for a lot of things too, right? And yeah, you may like as a old guy, I'd be like, yeah, I used to skate. That was pretty fun, right? I'm not doing it much anymore, but I still kind of want to be a little bit of that vibe. And I think a lot of people in the outdoor world are sort of that same way. Like, yeah, I got to go to work, but I don't necessarily need to be like full work kit in order to do that. I want to have like some of my personality, some of my interests, some of the things that I love and some of the vibe and the history that really speak to me kind of around me all the time, right? And I think especially, if you live in mountain towns or you love mountain culture, like I love going to the beach, right? So I love all of that culture there too, but I don't live there, but it doesn't mean I don't still like it. Right. So, and I think a lot of, like Fort Collins is a great example of like people want to come here to be part of that mountain culture. And it doesn't mean that has to be who they are, but they just want a piece of it, right? And they want to like just have that be a part of their life because they really, really enjoy it and they look forward to it every year, whether it's going to Estes or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They just want some of that, even if they can experience, or maybe they don't want to experience it all the time, and they like that 5% of their life that they get to be a part of that too,
Your
right?
brand offers that. Like your
Exactly.
brand absolutely offers that. I mean, it's, I like the Vans example too. It's like, yeah, hey, I'm a dad, but I don't want to wear white New Balance sneakers with my jeans. Like one, my wife will make fun of me. Two, it doesn't look very good.
Right.
So yeah, there are other options that could be, you can reflect your personality, things you're into. And Topo does that with kind of like the mountain, the adventure. And it's, so it started, let's go back to you hustling in these trade shows and getting into boutique places and you're getting into the coast. By the way, you started in a really exciting way, how many other people probably did start by their mom or their uncle buying a
Right.
bag and then
Yeah.
like showing their neighbor.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then
We did a little of that too, but it was later.
that would have been a much slower progression,
Yeah.
likely than
Yeah.
what actually ensued. What was the next stage? How did things pick up from there, from this time where you're hustling, you're going to the shows, you got over the imposter syndrome. You take it from there.
Yeah, I think we just sort of kept stair stepping all those things up. So I would say that my recommendation to anybody else doing this is probably not grow quite that fast, quite that wide. Right. So we weren't necessarily growing like massive revenue wise, but we were growing really wide in terms of like bringing on all these wholesale accounts, the boutiques that we're working with, international distribution, right? Online. We had a lot of channels to support. And we ended up opening one of our first retail stores as well. So I think that was like 2014. Trying to think back then. Yeah, I think it was around then. So that was the one in Denver. Our flagship location was still the same spot. Fort Collins store was shortly after that. So we had a lot of irons and a lot of fires, right? So I think that was great because we really figured it all out and did it all. It didn't really allow us to focus enough to grow one of them really, really quickly, right? So they all kind of grew about the same rate together, and it just sort of like spread our resources really thin.
How many hours a week were you putting in at this stage?
Oh
Because
yeah, it
this
was just
sounds
like
like,
7 days a week,
yeah, sounds
So
like all day, every day.
yeah, pretty much. But it was fine because it was one of
Because you
those things.
loved it, right?
Yeah, it was really fun, and especially I think early days are even more fun because you're just learning if you're that person, right? Like I was learning more about photography and like how to style clothes and like how to clip them out and like put them on the website and build an Instagram following and do all the things that you need to do. To me and my business partner at the time, it was like really, really interesting to I think just that all that learning, and all those new things were really, really cool. So it was like hobby and work at the same time. Like all of this newness was almost felt just like a hobby too, which was great. So again, if it's fun work, then it's great. And a lot of people may think that taking studio shots of product would really suck, right? And like editing them in Photoshop and doing all those things, right? But to me, I already knew quite a bit about it. So it was just doing it for myself was really, really interesting too. And I think that's the difference too.
It all keeps going back to you loved it. It's also just interestingly coincidental that all of these jobs that you had leading up to this time when you had this awakening when you were 30, we're seemingly preparing you perfectly for this future life.
Right. And I think was aware of what my skill set was and what it wasn't.
Sure.
Too.
You knew yourself a little bit better.
Right.
I mean, there's only one way to get to know yourself, right?
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people ask me, how do you deal with the stuff that you don't like to do? For me, I hooked up with one of my friends and became business partners with them. So I'm like, hey, would you want to do all this stuff? Because I don't want to do that stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'll do that stuff. That sounds interesting to me. Right. And I'm like, cool, I'll do the other side of it because that's really interesting to me. If I would have tried to do it all by myself, I probably would have hated it, to a certain degree, like half of it.
It probably wouldn't have even been possible or feasible.
Right. And it would have been at least very, very slow. Right. Because I would have tried to just like chip away at things, so, but we also didn't go the route of trying to raise capital early. We really just, like I'm saying, stair-stepped it up by ourselves, had some bank loans and kind of took that route. So, which is that's a path. You have a lot more control over it. You get to live your own life that way. It's far slower usually than going the investment route too. So I think that's a choice. I don't know if, I would have gone either way in retrospect. I am a fairly independent person, so it's nice to be able to, especially at that point, kind of do what you want, take your time, explore things, like have fun with it. It was really fun at that point to be doing that stuff. So I think it's just, that was our path and that's kind of, what we decided to do. And I would do a similar path and having had to do it all over again,
Well, it clearly worked out. So I don't know that you would or change anything.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But go back to where you went really wide. I mean, you went really wide first. Would you do that part differently? I mean, if you were going to tweak some things and give some advice to other people?
I think so. It's hard to say though, because a lot of that stuff really does lead to the next step in a way that you maybe can't see. So we definitely got a lot of brand awareness because of all of these different channels we were in. The digital landscape wasn't what it was or what isn't what it is now back then, right? The paid ads world, the, meta universe, all of that stuff was really just sort of coming into fruition at that point. So it really wasn't a matter of, if we just had a ton of money to put into digital ad spend, we could have hockey sticked it because it really didn't exist at that point. So the wholesale side was still really strong at that point, and that really was kind of the best path to go into if you wanted to grow a brand. Online was coming into its own for sure. Having hindsight there, if we had a bunch of money back then, we could have crushed it, right? If we would just dumped it into all the advertising at that point. But it was really unknown, and there was far less understanding about how that world worked. There were far fewer people out in the world that, agency-wise that you could use to do it. So everybody was kind of figuring out at the same point. And there are a lot of brands that absolutely killed it because they were the tech strong brands that really leaned into it early and grew quickly that way. A lot of them don't exist anymore because they weren't really brands, right? They were a product that they were able to, put a lot of ad dollars into, and people were kind of like, sweet, and they got rid of. So I think we had to do a lot of the foundational work to build a brand, which is definitely great long term, and I would say is even more important now that everybody's leaning back into brand because digital acquisition is so expensive anymore.
Well, the fact that you went so wide, that you
Yeah.
built slowly, organically, it
Right.
kind of created this foundation.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe unknowingly at the time because you were just kind of taking it step by step,
Yeah.
but the
Exactly.
foundation for what later would be.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we set ourselves up for a big company scale at that point too, because we had all of these things already in place. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, now we've got to figure out this wholesale channel. Oh, now we have to figure out online, or now we have to figure out how to do international distribution. We already had it, so it was a matter of just scaling it at that point and being able to devote enough time and energy into each one of those channels in order to make it work.
Yeah. And I mean, the next stage, I mean, things evolve from there. Take us where you went next.
Yeah, I mean, those are like kind of early days. My business partner now, Mark, is, still a part of the business. He's kind of more on the board now. And we, just kind of had to grow over time. And really, the interesting part is as you scale, you get to hire people who are way better at specific things than you ever could be, right? That have a lot of amazing skill sets in those areas that just would take you way too long to get there, right? So, both of us have always had to be these utility players, and at a certain point, you need people who are highly specific into whatever they're really good at, right? So the great part is we've been able to hire a lot of people who are extremely talented over the years. I've learned a ton from them. And they've just been able to grow the business to a spot where, like I'm saying, is like, it's really kind of, now we're in that pro level world, which is really interesting. We've always had this idea of like, oh yeah, we want to be a legit brand in the outdoor space. And, I mean, now we have the people and the product and the brand and all the things to really be a part of that bigger collective group of where we always wanted to be, which is great.
I mean, you're squarely in the pro space now. You're on vacation. You're seeing people with Topo bags. Heck,
Right.
I'm on vacation. I'm
Right.
seeing people with Topo bags. I'm sending you texts.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, more than that. I mean, you have physical retail locations, stores on the coast.
Yep.
Talk about where you're at now. I mean, retail locations, distribution. Where's Topo at now? And maybe just kind of fill people in on that.
Yeah, we sell all over the country. We work with a lot of great independent retailers, as well as some larger retailers that everybody's heard of, like REI and Backcountry, and kind of those classic players in the outdoor space, which has been great to be able to grow those relationships over time. And we have our own retail stores kind of on either coast, Boston, LA, here in Colorado, San Francisco as well. Like both Mark and I absolutely love San Francisco, and a lot of fan base in San Francisco too. So it's been really fun to have some retail locations there. And yeah, continue to have international presence in Asia and Europe and Canada, and a few other places around the world as well too. So
That's so huge.
Yeah, kind of doing all the things, which is great.
That's such. I mean, I felt like it was a few times ago we were talking. You were just getting ready to go on a plane to Vietnam, I think. And
Yeah,
just,
exactly. Check out some of our factories there. Yeah, and it's been really fun for me to learn the manufacturing process from sort of starting here in the U.S., being really hands-on with our factories here, then being able to expand into Asia and really just see the scale of what manufacturing looks like, and the talent and the quality and just the innovation that those places have. And we're not the only product or brand within these factories. There's a bunch of other stuff in there, so we get to kind of like peek over the curtain a little bit and see what other people are making, and kind of just see that bigger world. And being a product guy, that's just so fascinating to me, right? Like I just love all of it. So being able to see a little piece of hardware that another brand is working on, or being able to just see the processes that happen with our bags or our apparel, and kind of the difference between places like Vietnam or India, and like where their strengths are in those countries, and kind of what they do well, and what they've built up as a part of their core competency is just really, really fascinating to me. It's just been like mind blowing to be able to be exposed to that.
Well, it's cool to me too that, you started in Fort Collins a long time ago, and you could be anywhere now. Like
Yeah.
you could be doing this, and your team, Topo, you guys could have offices a lot of places.
Yep.
So why still Fort Collins?
To me, it's like we talked about. It's definitely one of those places where I'll go someplace else in the world, really love it, really appreciate it, and be just fascinated by it and have a great time. But every time I come home, I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful for what I have. And it's kind of all the things we talked about. It's just like the access to being outdoors, the access to having like a great town life. The community here is amazing. We have a great set of friends. I think all the things that Fort Collins provides together are just, such a great summation of the things that I like in life. And I would have a really hard time kind of finding that elsewhere. I could probably do it, but also like our brand is so based in mountain culture and Colorado and just the lifestyle here that it just makes so much sense that we should be living the lives that we espouse as a company and as a brand. And, being able to like create content for social and test things out and, talk to people who really live the life that we're building things for. That's just perfect, right? I think it'd be so much harder if we were living someplace that just wasn't so connected to us conceptually as a brand that we would have to sort of make that mental leap all the time, or like do a lot of guessing or like focus groups or whatever on the things that we're building. Whereas we can just hand them over to someone like, what do you think? They're like, well, I'll take it out this weekend and tell you what all the things that I'm doing,
Well,
So,
I love that. I mean, do you think it helps you attract talent too?
oh,
'Cause
it
I mean,
does.
yeah, people that work
Absolutely.
here locally, it does help you.
It definitely does. Yeah. I mean, doing what we do is pretty interesting to people, right? Like, maybe like managing our social account or building brand assets. It's way easier for a company that's making apparel and, doing cool stuff outdoors. And so pretty easy sell on that
Yeah, I mean,
one
compared
to
to
a lot
like
of people.
selling insurance or something,
Right,
it's
exactly.
probably
Exactly.
easier.
Yeah. So we get a lot of talented people to work for us, and we get a lot of people that just want to live here in Colorado as well, right? So the more you can keep people around, the more they're happy with their life outside of work, right? The better off you are. And so that has been great for us because people just tend to stick around, And even if they come from someplace else, they are those people that I'm talking about that want to be a part of that, mountain culture and that Colorado life, and that idea and the romanticism about it really exists here, and they get here and they're like, oh, that's for real, right? Like all this stuff actually
Totally.
exists. Yeah.
No, I
So
think they do. And when you're recruiting them, like, let's just say, because I mean, you guys have been growing for a long time, and you've had, I'm sure, had to have these conversations with people, like just getting that next real talented person in.
yeah.
Like, what are you telling them about Fort Collins? Like, what's your pitch to them? I mean, all these things that we just said, probably, but what else? Like, how are you kind of framing it?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's honestly like you see what Topo is, right? Like you can come here and just be that person, right? Like it's not going to be hard. You won't have to like fake it or do any of those other things. There's an amazing set of people around here who, as you know, just want to get people even more into the stuff that they're into, right? Like you can just sit down and someone will just keep talking at you
Like
about being
pickleball?
outside, right? Yeah.
Sarah's
So
told me to tone it down on the pickleball a little bit when we're in conversations
okay,
with
all
friends. So
right.
I've been
Yeah, that's
I've been
good.
working on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean it's a pretty easy sell, honestly, because a lot of the people that are, I think if they're interested in it, this is like one of the quintessential examples of being able to live in a mountain town, right? And the idea that it's maybe not so small and isolated that it would be tough to find something else, like if Topo didn't work out for them, right? They can still do other things in this area, which I think is kind of reassuring to them too. So, and it's, Denver's close. All the other towns around here too. I think that's kind of like we were talking about Fort Collins. All the other towns now too have a little cool downtowns, right? It's not just as like one or two towns in the area that have anything cool. Like all of them have really sweet a community, around where people live too. So I think that's why people are sticking around longer too, is that it's not such a specific location where you can't find something else. Or, people may commute a little bit if it's not like right downtown here in Fort Collins. You can go to, one of the other communities around here that's another like 15 minutes, right? So
that's a really good point, because if you're like in Salida or
Right.
somewhere, it's like, well,
right.
if it doesn't work out,
Right. It might not work out.
it might,
Yeah.
like you're moving.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And you're right.
Exactly.
This has become such a multi-dimensional, multifaceted, robust local
Right.
economy, with Colorado State University, with the healthcare sector, with the tech sector. And then all these surrounding communities of kind of northern Colorado becoming more of a regional place too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of friends here that, work one town over or a few minutes away, and it's not like it's a huge deal, right? It's a short commute for them too, and it may be in a different town, but there's just a large community around Fort Collins too. I think they prefer to live in Fort Collins because they like the downtown here. They like the kind of like all the things we've been talking about, the trail system, all those things. But the opportunity is there to work, in another community if you need to. Ideally, yes, you would just be here in town, but I think that's what's really nice about it now, and I think that's why people have been able to stay here for so long and really put down roots. Is there just those opportunities that come up that maybe are even a better opportunity than the one they had here when they first moved to Fort Collins or something. But they love the community here so much that it's not that big a sacrifice to drive 15 minutes to someplace else,
All right, we're going to let people in on a little secret here.
Okay.
We're going to talk about red feather.
All right, sweet. Okay.
Nobody better to talk about red feather
That's
with.
right. Number one fan. Yeah.
Because people were talking about, your employees and, living the mountain lifestyle and just, living, breathing topo. You might think, hey, you have to drive 2 hours to get the mountains. You don't. You don't need to go all the way up to Steamboat to, all these other resort communities. You certainly can. They're beautiful, but 45 minutes away, Red Feather Lakes.
Yep.
You're one of the first people I've known that's really just, going up there every weekend in the summer for
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell everyone about Red Feather.
Yeah, Red Feather is great. So there's kind of two different communities up there. One is the Red Feather community, and then the other one is Crystal Lakes.
So those are separate. I always thought those were kind of both in Red Feather. But no.
Yeah, definitely separate. I mean, they essentially just sort of bleed into each other, so it feels like one big community up there. But yeah, a lot of great cabins. Obviously, the lakes up there are amazing. My jam is fishing, so that's pretty much all I think about all the time in the summer. So you can fish at the lakes. Even as a non-member, you can just go buy a pass. So I think like buying a golf membership or something, but it's for fishing. So you can go up there. They manage the lakes amazingly well. And it's like you said, it's so close to here. I think what I like about it is it really is a community. So you're not necessarily like in the middle of nowhere, but you're definitely out, and it's really amazing outdoor experience, but it's also kind of cool. There's like a small town, and you can like go get groceries. You can go we always go to the hardware store, right?
I mean, so people have the right expectation. Like small town might even be an exaggeration.
Right. Small town. It's basically like half a street.
Yeah, and it's like not paved.
Right, exactly. Yeah, none of it's paved.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really cool about it. And the lakes are really beautiful. And it's just, kind of one of those, like you say, it's like this hidden gem that I don't think a lot of people realize that it's such an amazing mountain community, like right next to us here. And it's, surrounded by national forest. So if you know, want to fish there, or you want to hang out there, you want to go hike there, you can do that. Or you can go like up Dead Man Road, off the end, and it's national forest, you know, for as long as you want to drive up there. So a lot of opportunities. A lot of people are, you know, gravel biking is really big now around Fort Collins. Tons of people started gravel bike up there because there are a bunch of, like you're saying, like no paved road. It's all dirt road, so it's all gravel, right? So bunch of riding opportunities, on trails as well as on the roads up there. So yeah, great little restaurants. You know, like I said, a couple of stores, got the ice cream shop, and it's just awesome. I love it.
We took the kids up to Beaver Creek Meadows 2
Yeah.
weeks ago. You know, we just did, you know, sledding. You grab the ropes and
Right.
they hooked our little
Yeah, it was like a little
tube
lift,
in.
right?
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
lift. They hook your
Yeah.
tube onto the lift.
Yep.
You know, so I have a 6 and a 7-year-old, and it takes us up, and you know, my wife Sarah, we just kind of took turns with the kids going down, and we just had a blast, like doing run after run. A little restaurant on site there. Then there's 2 little like ponds that are, you know, of course, frozen over. Did some ice skating.
I know, it's wild, right? And that's what's cool about it, is it's so close to here, and everything is cold. It freezes. So like this, like 2 weeks from now, I'm going up to play at the annual pond hockey tournament up there. So it's super fun, community to be involved with, and kind of, you know, I would say like similar to Fort Collins, has been really consistent, and all the investment that they made are in the right spots up there, like towards the lakes, towards the communities up there, and the people that live up there full time, as well as the people that you know, just have seasonal properties up there, are really passionate about it. They love it, and so it's a great community. Like everybody's super friendly. Go into the stores, you know, you talk to people as long as you want, and yeah, it's amazing.
It's
Really
special
fun.
up there. It is a hidden gem, and it's still a hidden
Totally.
gem, which is
Yeah.
surprising to me. I mean, hey, we called twice to confirm there was actually snow up there, because yeah, a few weeks back there was like no snow here. It hadn't snowed in like 45 days here.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so we confirmed but it's wild. Yeah, 45 minutes later you're up there and there's snow everywhere.
There's snow, yeah, because it's right next to the mountain, so they get a lot of snow, and you know, it's another 4,000 feet up in elevation too, so it's definitely a different world, and you know, in summer it feels very like high mountain vibes. There are like hummingbirds everywhere, and elk and deer and moose and all the things. So it's really cool, especially I would say for people who are just kind of getting used to being in the mountains. You're out, but you're not isolated, right? So it's a pretty easy acclimation to that environment. And even for someone like me who loves being out in the middle of nowhere and loves being that extreme, I also really kind of like being able to just like drive over the store real quick and get some onion rings, you know? So it's pretty nice overall. Yeah.
That is nice. Yeah, I mean, it's great in the summer too. You're right. I mean, it's like you got the national forest right there. I went up last summer with Sarah and I with some friends and stayed at a house, and we just had this weekend where, you know, the river is right by us, and you know, there was a part of it where we did cold plunging, and somebody had built like you know, it almost looked like an outhouse down there, but it was a hot sauna room. So we were hot sauning, cold plunging, and then just walking randomly, no trails, but just walking through the national forest, which was beautiful, and the trees, and it's just, yeah, totally different world. 45 minutes away.
It is, yeah, and you know, I think what's great about it is that, like you're saying, like you can have all of those outdoor experiences right there too, right? Like it's the way that the communities have been built. It's really integrated into lakes and rivers and trails and all the things that are right out your. We can just go, you know, literally like from your doorstep out to a trail and walk out in the national forest, you know. So yeah, absolutely love it. Can't say enough about it.
Yeah, it's a hidden gem. Check it out if you're listening. Now, going back to Fort Collins, what are some other spots you and your Topo people like? What are the hot spots? Let's talk coffee, brunch, lunch, dinner. Where are some places you're going?
Yeah, definitely. You know, we have a pretty serious circuit that we hit overall. But lunch spot, I love hitting Choice City. I can't get enough of it. I love going to Lucille's. So many good places to
Lucille's
go.
is a breakfast spot, everybody. New Orleans style breakfast.
Yep. You can kind of get it for lunch too, which I kind of like.
Yeah, I do like that too.
I've like never been able to eat breakfast as a guy for some reason, but I love breakfast food. So the fact that they serve it, a little bit later in the day is like perfect.
Plus, there's
for
a
me,
line
so.
like around the corner at
Exactly.
8
yeah.
a.m. when they open anyway. So you're probably timing it right.
Yeah, definitely. Dinner spots, Bistro Natil, we love. The Regional is great. I absolutely adore the Charcoal Broiler too. That's like one of my favorite classic spots. I feel like
you're the third person on this show to mention the
really?
Charcoal Broiler.
Okay, we got some other Charcoal Broiler people too,
which is
awesome.
so random.
I love it.
Ann Hutchison, president of the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce. If you're listening, she might be the biggest fan, but it sounds like you're up there.
Oh yeah. We'll duke it out for biggest fan because I think those like classic Western steakhouses are they should be like put on the registry to like never change them ever. I mean, it's got like super weird architecture.
I don't think they need to with the Charcoal Broiler. No one seems in a hurry to change anything.
No, which is good. Which is
cool.
Yeah. It's been really
has a really
unique
look, right?
Definitely, yeah. And then I would say overall the of course the brewery scene here is sort of world renowned, right? So great to go hang out at New Belgium and all the other amazing breweries in town. Each one I would say has its own personality, which is great. So it's not like you go to one and you've sort of experienced it. Like every one of them, and I think this is another great part of sort of like integrating into those communities too. Is there are breweries all over town now that are small, local, that are just sort of like community meetup spots for people that make the the neighborhood kind of great to be able to just have a place to hang out, and great beers. And I'm super obsessed with food. This is like my side hobby. I cook when I don't have to do topo, right? So I think that's what's great about the breweries too, is they really integrate food well. There's a lot of really great like food trucks and carts, and all the people that work there are extremely talented. And it's this sort of like whatever, it's like the Napa of beer, right? You come here and it's you can just learn so much about it. And each one has their, whether it's Funkworks with a bunch of sours, you can learn about that whole history there, to like over by my house, Prost just does like German beers, and
so good.
It's amazing.
Kolsch.
So yeah, it's so great to have that in town. And I think it's like it's not necessarily unique anymore, but I would say has been a really kind of kind of core idea of Fort Collins in general, especially with New Belgium being here.
I think what's unique about it is so many of these breweries have just kind of spawned from these beer groups, these home brewer groups, and this sort of culture. And then then there's like the Gilded Goat is another newer brewery in Old Town. They've been in Fort Collins for a while at their Midtown location, but they have a great spot in Old Town on Mountain Avenue. Live music there every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. It's kind of a nice cozy vibe. But these other ones you mentioned too, they just there's a special kind of energy there that I think is only there if it's the local people who care.
Totally agree, and I think that's the ones that end up doing well really have their own personality. They've got just this community around them. Like Equinox right behind our store there, right? And they do really specific things to their business that make it work really, really well, right? And those are the beers that they make. Also how they get involved in the community, things like events that they do as well, who they partner with, who they kind of associate themselves with as a business as well as a concept. And I think, overall, like I'm not super connected to the beer world, but I know they all work together. They all like, borrow a cup of sugar from each other. And I think that's what's great about it. And I've also heard that if you don't do that, you don't last here in Fort Collins. So you've got to be a part of that community. You've got to be a nice, member of it. You got to be symbiotic with everybody else, which I think is really, really cool, especially in a competitive environment like that they all work together and they all lift each other together, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, having that abundance mentality.
Totally. Absolutely.
I mean, Equinox, just a little tip, if people listening, if you are out in the summer, their patio
So
in
good.
back.
Yeah.
It's like hidden, right?
It is,
You
yeah.
wouldn't know it was back there
Yeah.
unless you're really looking for it, kind of winding through
Right.
the
But again,
brewery.
like the alley
Right.
vibe in Fort Collins is great. You just go into these alleys and they're built out and they're beautiful. And you just can duck into this patio back there and it's even better, you know?
Yeah, you're like,
So,
where is that? You see
right.
this really cool back patio and you're like, where is that? And you kind of walk around the street and you get to the front to see where it is, what it is. But it's just that there's so many hidden treasures. That's one of them. You mentioned Choice City. I love that spot for lunch
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
The Buffalo Reuben, everybody. Like they're famous for the
Just
Buffalo
like
Reuben.
I can't get past the burgers, honestly.
Oh, their
Like,
burgers are you're
it's
right.
so good. And it's like not, I wouldn't even probably say that's their core. Like the sandwiches are their core, right? But I always go there and just grab a burger and I'm like, oh, this is the best ever. Because like the quality of everything is so amazing. And you can tell that they just know exactly what they're doing with it too. So,
Right.
and again, another good spot, you know, to have a really wide selection of beer too, which is great.
Yeah,
So,
you're right. It's funny that people don't even talk about that. They have an amazing selection
Amazing
of
beer
curated
selection.
beer there.
Yeah. And it's always like really new, interesting stuff that you may not find anywhere else.
Right.
So yeah, their taps there are amazing. So,
I mean, local people who care. Again,
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I mean, just curating an experience.
Right.
Just really, really giving something to people.
Yep.
It's really it's special.
It is. Yeah.
So where does Topo go from here? You know, I mean, I know you'll always be in Fort Collins. That's clearly
given,
not going to
right?
change.
Right.
That's almost a given. But you know, what's next for you guys? What are you excited about?
You know, I think for us, it's really just being able to kind of expand on this idea of mountain culture, right? Like we've sort of we're on the like that again, that like kind of crossover between outdoor and lifestyle. And I think where we've really solidified this idea of kind of taking that Vans approach, right? Of being like mountain culture is like really who we are and basing our brand around that. And that could provide us, you know, maybe new product categories, or that could, you know, kind of like slightly reframe what we're thinking about in terms of creating content or talking about as a brand. But I think internally as well as, you know, kind of what we've been doing externally for the past few years is just really leaning into this idea that is mountain culture and truly like what Fort Collins in general is to me, right? And just really looking at it holistically and how do we as a brand get people to get a piece of that regardless of where you are, right? And I think that's what's really exciting about it to me, because a lot of brands that I follow and, you know, buy things from, I don't necessarily get to be a part of that specific location or idea or whatever they're about, but I want a piece of it, right? So I think the more we can give people a piece of what we love here and truly get them excited about it and really have that just be this part of their life in general, that's what I'm really excited about it. And honestly, it's like truly, it's like trying to bottle up that Fort Collins vibe and really put it out into the world. And I think people would be really into it.
I love that. So where do people go if they do want to get a piece of it? Is it, so you direct them to the website, tell them to go to one of your retail locations, all the above?
Yeah, all the above. You can go to topodesigns.com or head down here in Fort Collins on College and hit the store down there. Everybody works down there. It's great. It's a good vibe in the store, and you can really get a kind of holistic view of what we're about as a brand. We have a lot of events down there too. So we do First Fridays as well as bring in a lot of music into the store too. So very often if someone's playing down the street at the Aggie, they'll be nice enough to do a quick set in the store for us. So keep an eye out for like really intimate kind of vibes of a show at our store there. So we do those as often as we can and kind of give people another reason to come in and check out Topo there.
That's awesome. I feel like First Friday is like Fort Collins language.
Totally.
And we always use it. We know what it means, but for those who don't know what it means, explain First Fridays.
Yeah, a lot of the art studios and creative businesses in town open up, stay open later on the first Fridays of the month, and so we stay open later, kind of be a part of that community. People are out having dinner, walking around, experiences things just in the downtown location. So it's definitely been great for us overall, and kind of a reason to sort of like talk to people outside of normal shopping hours and kind of get involved in the brand, which is great. So
Love it.
yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see where it continues to go.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
It's been fun watching everything from the outside and just knowing you, being a friend, and just I've been so impressed with everything you've done. I can't wait to see all the continued massive success that's going to be in the future, and just appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And chatting and giving everybody, I feel like we gave everybody a little bit of a piece of Fort Collins here just in the show. If they listen to it, they're going to pick up some good tips, some things to do, maybe get even more dialed into the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all the kind words, and definitely appreciate you having me on. It was a fun time.
All right, Jedd. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.